While pop culture tend to portray the 80s in a more favorable light these days, it was always considered a very contentious period in the modern history of the world. In the 80s, there was a conscientious shift towards conservatism after much progressive strikes in the 60s and 70s. Somehow, the Americans managed to elect a celebrity, Ronald Reagan, into the White House, and he miraculously survived an assassination attempt during his first term as a president. Seeing nuclear missiles as an existential threat, Reagan pursued an expensive initiative using space-based shields to protect the US. The initiative was nicknamed Star Wars by the media, possibly to increase relevancy among the masses. Meanwhile, US Cold War rival, the USSR, was stuck in a long and drawn-out war in Afghanistan, a war that the Soviet forces assumed would be resolved within a year. But enough about politics. In the movies, art reflected life as a yuppie culture reigns supreme. Gordon Gekko in Wall Street informed everyone that greed is good, while he went about dissolving companies and providing nothing of value. Excessive consumerism took flight based on extended credits. Giant cellular phones in cars were the ultimate wealth symbol. So in the meantime, an aerobic craze dominated the fitness arena, seemingly speared on by celebrities like Jane Fonda and Richard Simmons. Tons of women and even some men put on tight-fitting spandex outfits of an amazing spectrum of colors while heading to the fitness studio to move along to the pop music of the day. And speaking of music, the changes were fast and furious. So after giving a visceral shock to the mainstream in the late 70s, punk rock found itself displaced by the more commercially viable new wave music, which also ushered in the much smoother but overproduced sounds of synth pop. Rock and pop music was once again dominated by a flashy and polished sound, where fashion and style were as important, if not more, than the music itself. So if at this point you are thinking the images in the videos don't quite match up with the narrative, don't worry, you are not wrong. The point of it all is obviously to highlight how history has a tendency to repeat itself despite our best intentions, or lack thereof. As many of you will probably surmise by now, the past decades that we have experienced are merely just a rehash of the 80s. And I have a theory behind that. Okay, just as the 90s crowd embraced the punk ethos of the late 70s, the millennial crowd, once they became the key drivers of the economy, quickly turned against that and embraced the social norms and aesthetics of the 80s. So while there was a massive financial crash in 2008, the crash also helped to reset the economy and usher in a decade of rapid growth, but unfortunately also introduced get-rich-quick schemes such as the crypto and MFT trends. So music production became much more accessible, as any aspiring musician could get started on a laptop and a copy of Ableton or Logic. The music grew to reflect that, with music based in EDM and hip-hop gaining much traction due to the widespread availability of the production tools. However, the downside of this democratization of music also led to plenty of overproduced and generic work flooding the streaming platforms. However, I feel that things are about to change again. What we are starting to see today is Gen Z joining the workforce for the first time and realizing that hyperinflation is a thing that the school has not prepared them for. With affordable homes becoming a fixture of the past, is it any wonder that the new generation, who had no prior concept of paying for music beyond a subscription, is suddenly interested in the physical ownership of media like CDs and vinyls? Perhaps in this minor way, the younger generation can feel that they have some form of ownership and build an identity in the process. Okay. So what does this have to do with music trends in general? With the recent pivot into AI and data centers, we are starting to see PC components as well as consumer electronics go up in prices. This, coupled with the hyperinflation that is already making everything super expensive, will usher in an era of going back to basics and subsequently a resurgence in rock music. There will always be aspiring musicians. So if laptop production and subscription-based tools become increasingly expensive and out of reach to the regular people, there will come a time where picking up a cheap guitar and some used amps will become more appealing again. In addition, individuals who are bored of the isolated nature of social media may once again crave the simplicity and joy of forming a band with like-minded friends. After all, even Taylor Swift started out as a female country singer playing a guitar and singing songs about heartbreak and yearning. So as she became more successful, her relationships with other celebrities become fodder for her songs. And her live shows become glitzy cabaret affairs that probably only the hardcore Swifties can love. So frankly, in this new economic climate, even hardcore fans may find it difficult to handle 30 different versions of an album and flash sale statics that capitalize on FOMO. We are starting to see the culture shift again. The younger generation is embracing 90s shoegaze bands like Slowdive and My Bloody Valentine, and new shoegaze artists such as Whips and Glare are appealing to the TikTok crowd. In 2025, Britpop make a minor comeback of sorts when bands like Pulp and Suede release critically acclaimed records that receive warm reception beyond their old fan base. Even Pavement, the face of lo-fi slacker rock in the 90s, is seeing a minor resurgence following the screening of their biopic Pavements, a documentary which would appear to have arrived 20 years too late. But what is more telling is the return of young rock bands to the top music list of 2025. Rock bands have never truly gone away, but critical reception have pretty much ignored or turned against them in the past decade or so. It is therefore surprising to see bands like Geese and Wednesday cracking many top 10 lists in 2025. For me, Geese reminds me of both the best parts of Radiohead and Modest Mouse, particularly with Cameron Winter's vocals sharing an uncanny resemblance to that of Tom York's. On the other hand, Wednesday sounds like the second coming of Dinosaur Jr., albeit with a female vocalist. For me, this return to the rawness and primal nature of 90s rock is an exciting development. I imagine if you are watching this video based on the title and description alone, you are equally excited too. So perhaps it's time to dust off the flannel shirts and haul out the old CD players and boomboxes and enjoy this revival, however long it may last. Okay. Thank you for listening.